Hi, it's Louise at Spiral Bright Insight. I wanted to do a check-in with you and just give you a heads up as to some of the transits and aspects that are forming this week. Now, if you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a galactic and an intuitive astrologer, and I bring content that is pretty much always around astrology or energy work in some form. So I hope you enjoy what I have to share. And if you do sort of have any feedback or any comments or anything that I say particularly resonates, please do share in the comments below, because I know that people do read them and it's always really helpful to know that what I'm sharing is of use and is resonating. And thank you to those who do share regularly. I really enjoy sort of reading the comments and kind of reading about your experiences. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the energies and the insight that has been coming through. Now, obviously, we are in the hangover from the full moon in Libra. The moon has now moved into Scorpio. It's sitting at 2 degrees of Scorpio while I share, or while I record this content for you this evening. But the full moon in Libra energy still feels really potent, really, really present. And of course, one of the big themes, and I'm sure lots of you watched my video about the full moon in Libra, was having access to this mirror, which is what comes up when we're working with Libra, particularly with the full moon and, you know, the surface, the moon being completely illuminated. There was nowhere to hide. And suddenly having this understanding that everything outside of ourselves is actually a reflection, a mirror image of what is going on inside. So particularly if you are experiencing relationships or situations that are triggering or that are challenging you in some way, I felt this moon gave us this invitation and this opportunity to start to see what is going on behind the veil. So when there is a challenging or triggering relationship, what is it showing you that you cannot see within yourself? And I know quite a few people have shared with me that they did have really strong flashes of insight in this full moon. And for me, there was a really strong sort of invitation to come into a sense of stillness, to really slow down in a way that I have not been able to do for a long, long time. And of course, with this full moon ruled by Libra, this was about experiencing everything in a very embodied way through the senses. And often the only way we can do that is by slowing down, particularly if you're someone like me who is very much in the head, you know, very mind, strong air energy in my chart. So I do find it quite difficult to slow down and to switch off and to come into the body. But yesterday it was really, really beautiful because I had an opportunity to do that, and the stillness and the peace at a physical level that I was able to achieve was just so beautiful. And I was shown that, you know, it is when we come into that state, when we pause, when we can find that center ground, that equilibrium, where we're not being pulled in one way or in another, where we can just sort of center ourselves and come into that pause, that it is from there, from that stillness and that pause, that the inner knowing, the inner wisdom and that insight can rise to the surface and be seen. And I feel that was a really, really strong message for the Libra full moon, which really touched me. So, you know, I would love to hear if you experienced anything similar, certainly yesterday and even today. We have to sometimes wait for the energies to settle. And, you know, I acknowledge that it is not easy to do that at the moment because we are being bombarded. You know, there is a lot of really sort of electrical energy which is really shaking up our cells and affecting our senses. But this full moon gave us this beautiful opportunity to almost transcend that, or rather descend and sort of come under the radar, if you like, and really just settle down into the earth ground and come into that pause and that stillness. And it was from there, when the scale sort of settled and that equilibrium was achieved, that this peace could rise up from within, which again, it's not something that I access very often at all, but it was very, very present yesterday. And what was even more beautiful, of course, was that Venus stationed direct very shortly after the full moon. So Venus is currently, she's still stationary. She hasn't quite got going yet. So we have, as I film this, we have got this beautiful pause. And of course, although Venus is now going to move forward, she's still going to spend the next couple of weeks, I think until the 30th of April it is, she will still be in Pisces. So she has got a new sense of who she is. She's been in retrograde. She's sort of gone into her inner recesses and her inner reserves and really explored who she is. But she is, although she's now sort of been reborn, you know, she's got a new sense of who she is. She knows her worth. She's really sort of had a massive reset. She is still going to be working over the coming days on letting go. But this time, instead of sort of this being a really internal process, and you know, having to experience perhaps quite a level of disruption in order to achieve the reset that she needed to set in motion, she's been able, while she's been retrograde, she's been able to release anything that was distorting her image, or her self-image, and her understanding of who she was at her core. And now as she starts to move forward again through these final degrees of Pisces, she is really coming into a new ability to let go and to dissolve and release all those remaining parts that are holding her back from being in her truth and from connecting to who she is. And of course, she's now a morning star, so she's much more sort of that warrior version of Venus as the morning star, much more sure of who she is, ready to go out and stand in her truth. But it is really, really gentle this time, because the Pisces energy is so fluid. It's so gentle. There is a lot of forgiveness coming up, and this is self-forgiveness. This is being able to forgive yourself for perhaps, you know, not seeing the truth of who you were, perhaps being too afraid to stand up and express your authentic self, for not having the courage to stand in your truth and to shine your light. You know, there may be regrets coming up as you start to claim this new reborn version of you. And of course, you know, our journey will mirror Venus's movements as well. There may be regret coming up, but actually all of that is being allowed to fall away, you know, and just an acknowledgement that if that was an old version of you that is now ready to be released and to be transmuted, then that version of you was there for a reason. It served a purpose, and to acknowledge it, to thank it, to stand in gratitude for it, and then just to allow it to fall away. So that feels really important. You know, this is not a time for regrets. This is absolutely a time to forgive the self. Don't judge the self. Don't stand in judgment or denial. But you know, it feels very gentle, but also very, very self-assured, as if this new version of self that is coming through is coming up from deep within, and it is rising up. It's going to be very hard to stop it rising and to stop it from being seen and sort of expressing itself. And I hope that makes sense. That's kind of the feeling that I've been getting. But there is this really sort of solid, strong, but very gentle level of new self-assurance. And of course, Venus is all about our point of attraction and our magnetism. And what I'm being shown as well is, whereas before we might have sort of been under the impression, the programming, you know, the belief that somehow to get what we wanted, you know, we had to work really hard and we had to go out and we had to make the effort, and it was all sort of a real sort of striving to be who we wanted to be, to get where we want to be. Now, with this new version of Venus being reborn, coming up through the waters, you know, again, it's very ethereal, it's very mystical, it's very fluid, and there's so much flux going on. It's still but as she rises from the depths, she knows what she wants. She knows who she is. And by standing in that new frequency, she becomes her own new point of attraction, and she is able to magnetize what is meant for her to her without any real sense of effort. Now, of course, we're always going to have to put the work in, but it doesn't have to be forced, because whenever we're sort of forcing something, we're coming from a place of lack, and the new Venus is not standing in lack. You know, that whole lack consciousness has literally melted away, and will continue to do so as we move through these final degrees of Pisces, so that when she comes to 0 degrees of Aries, she's ready to really stand up and to be seen and to stand in her authenticity. So these couple of weeks are really, really beautiful for these final sort of releasing, letting go, the final stages of this beautiful metamorphosis that Venus has been going through. And yeah, I just kind of feel that, Venus and each of us as an individual, we are ready to stand up and to just show up without apology. There is no need to, or no requirement to apologize for who you are now and going forward. And we just really reset this inner sense of self-worth. And again, if you're not feeling it directly, it is subtle. It's not like, oh, here I am. Everybody, I'm amazing. No, it is very, very subtle, very gentle, very soft. And that is Venus in Pisces. So just sort of, start to notice where you might be feeling slightly different, where you might be getting some new insight or some new ideas, or, oh, maybe I could try that. I haven't really felt like, I deserved that before, or that I was good enough before, but actually maybe I am. And that is kind of what is coming through really strongly to me. Now, as we've got Venus now sort of stationary direct, so she's about to take off and continue her journey. This week is a week of transitions. So in the sort of following the full moon, we have had the moon has moved into Scorpio, and on Monday, tomorrow, Mercury is going to move to the anaretic degree, the last degree of Pisces. So this is the final degree of the zodiac. And then on Wednesday, Mercury will move into 0 degrees of Aries. So these are 2 points that Mercury has been to and visited fairly recently, twice already, because he crossed over this threshold, then moved back in retrograde, and now he's ready to move over that threshold point again. So this is really, really huge in terms of this new reset. And it is a reset in terms of our understanding, our mindset. There is clarity coming. And as Mercury moves over that final degree, he is letting go of a lot of old mindsets and old belief systems and old ways of thinking. And also, I think the old ways of talking to the self and judging the self, all of that is being released, and he is coming forward into the 0 degree point, the 0 point, beginning of all that is, with this new understanding of self, huge clarity, ready to go, ready to stand up and to speak and stand in his truth. And this time there's a slight difference because Mercury truly believes in himself. He's completely on board with his version of authentic truth, and he's ready to just get going and start to show up. So that feels really, really powerful. Obviously, we've been through these quite very intense retrograde periods with the personal planets, and this feels like, this is the week where things really do start to shift. So I'm just going to turn my light on actually, because I can't see my notes. Got a beautiful sunset happening in the background. Is that going to work? Okay, now I can see what I'm looking at. And then as Mercury moves sort of through 0 degrees of Aries, he's going to meet with Neptune. So this is almost like a new dream. Neptune is there sort of creating this vision, really strong creator energy for sure at 0 degrees of Aries. And Mercury is coming along to kind of bring the details and the understanding and the fire. Let's get going with this. It's kind of what it feels like. And then sort of within the same time frame, we have the following day, Mars will move from, so this is Friday, Mars is going to be at 29 degrees of Cancer, which obviously the final degree of Cancer, and will move into Leo. So again, this is Mars moving from water. Mars has been in Cancer for a long time due to this retrograde period. He was in Leo. He's now moving back into Leo, and there is almost like this boost of energy, this fire, this roar coming through like a burst of light. as if, the stage has been set and the spotlight is about to be turned on, and Mars is just going to go for it. So the fact that Mars is moving into Leo shortly after Venus is now direct. Mercury's moved out of Pisces, is into Aries. The Sun is about to move into Taurus as well, and of course the Sun in Taurus is really going to shine a spotlight on our self-worth, about how we value ourselves, about how we see ourselves, as well as sort of bringing in some more sort of strong builder energy, creator energy, to kind of create this beautiful, stable foundation, like this beautiful platform from which Mars can suddenly, stand in this spotlight, ignite the drama and the fire and the inspiration that is all coming through. It's like this inner fire that has been sort of been nurtured and has been building while Mars was in Cancer, is ready to burst out and be seen and to show up. It's just so, so powerful. And of course, the Sun on Saturday 19th into the 20th is then going to move into Taurus. So again, that just feels really, really beautiful. This is a much more solid, stable base coming through. So to have three planets all at the anaretic degree within days of each other feels really, really potent. So, again, with the backdrop of the strong Pisces energy, this is really about still letting go, releasing, but it's releasing old versions of the self, old patterns. And one thing I really noticed, and particularly with the light of this Libra full moon, was how easy it is to step back into our default patterns, our default habits. And what was quite crazy, but also quite clever about this full moon, was how it was illuminating and shining a light on those patterns. And I found it happening to me twice in quite close succession, where something happened and I instantly went into my default setting, which, unfortunately was a negative mindset. I thought the worst. I sort of panicked. I was ready to it was all to do with being seen and someone sort of having watched some of my content, and I wasn't like entirely sure that I felt comfortable about that, which is crazy because this is a public platform. But anyway, that's a separate story, and how that person was reacting to it. But what I realised was that I was projecting what I thought, or how I thought they were reacting, and I was then anticipating and projecting the response. And it didn't take long for me, thank goodness, with the light of this full moon, to realise that that was my own fear, my own insecurity, my own sort of low sort of self-worth coming out, which again is a habit, and it's one that I have been in for many, many, many years, almost from the beginning. And I realized, this isn't about them. This isn't about what they're feeling. This is about me. And yet I was sort of seeing it took an external, and it took someone else and a situation external to me to be able to highlight that. And I hope that makes sense. But I was shown sort of a completely different perspective, and how, I automatically just went into this setting of, oh my goodness, somehow this is bad, and I don't want to be seen, and I don't want to be judged. And that was kind of what came straight up. But I realised that I was just projecting that on to the other person, and actually they weren't necessarily standing in judgment at all. And I just created this story, perhaps because, that has been my default setting, because I somehow convinced myself, or that it is safer to hide away, and that if you put yourself out there, that suddenly you're putting yourself in the firing line. And again, anyone who's got a public platform, of course we're doing that every day. But I realized that what I was anticipating wasn't actually reality. I think that's what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to get to. So, if we have got patterns that we almost naturally fall back into, this full moon has been a really beautiful opportunity perhaps to see them, and to see them in the cold or full warm light of day, and to realize that actually they're not serving us, because so much of what we have been sort of seeing in other people, and actually is something that we just haven't been able to see within the self. And when we come back and we focus on the self and we heal those wounds that lie within the self, thank you, Chiron in Aries, it just really helps to, first of all, become much more sure of who we are, but then that then reflects back in our relationships and our experience of the outer world, because as we're kind of standing in this sense of we know who we are, we know what we're here for, and we know what our frequency is now, we can then project that out, and the universe and our magnetic field will reflect that back and will match our relationships to that new version of truth, and will match our experiences. And yeah, the other thing I was shown that, with this kind of analogy of the mirror, when we stand in the fullness of who we are and we claim all of who we are, and we sort of are able to release, the aspects of ourselves that maybe we're scared of, or that we're not sure of, or that we're standing in self-judgment of, then the universe reflects that back. And rather than sort of connecting and reflecting the aspects of us that may be standing in lack, or we may be holding in lack, we are reflected back this whole version of ourselves. And this is what Venus in retrograde really has been trying to find and trying to reclaim and rediscover and reconnect to. And it feels very much that as we move forward, I'm not saying, everything's going to be amazing, because of course there's still going to be challenges, and there's still going to be triggers, and there'll be lots of opportunities to work through those. But it does feel as if there is this sort of deep, softer, stronger sense of inner knowing, which will help to build that self-worth, that self-esteem, and that value, that new sense of value that is going to start trickling out. And when we own it, when we claim it, when we stand in that frequency of integrity and of truth and of self-knowing and of wholeness, then everything outside of ourselves starts to sort of change and shift to reflect that back to us. And of course, with Mercury, moving into Aries, there is this new voice, this sort of this really strong new voice of authenticity, this frequency of authenticity that Mercury is able to express, perhaps in ways that he wasn't able to before. He can speak his truth. He knows what he thinks, and he's happy and courageous enough with the Aries signature to stand by and to voice that, because he understands and he knows who he is. So as Mercury moves over the anaretic degree, he's coming into contact with Shet in the Pegasus constellation. Again, we've talked about this star so much over the past months, but again, this is about really breaking free from those chains, from those limitations, those restrictions, particularly in the mind and the mindset and those belief patterns that we have clung on to, often because it was safer to believe and think a certain way. And that's the truth. Often it is easier and safer to stand in a certain frame of reference rather than break free and perhaps, challenge the status quo, even the inner status quo, because, we often sort of project it to the outside, but actually often just sort of challenging yourself can be the biggest hurdle. So this is about breaking free, having that freedom to fly high and to see the bigger picture and step into a much more multi-dimensional aspect and frame of reference. And then as Mars moves over this final degree of Cancer, he's going to activate one of the stars in Monoceros, which is always a beautiful one that I always love to bring into these videos, because this is unicorn energies. This is one of the unicorn stars. And this just brings, again, at the same time as Mercury sort of working with Pegasus, which is obviously, equine, the winged horse. And we also have the Monoceros energy, which is even more magical equine energy, very much about unity consciousness and being able to see all these beautiful colors coming together. very magical, very mystical, very playful energy for sure, hugely creative. And so for that to be activated by Mars, it just feels exquisite. At the same time, Mars is in our trine to Alpha Centauri in Centaurus, which again is this beautiful energy linked to the builder and the creator, and the ability to really start to see how we are going to create and build new Earth. Alpha Centauri is very much linked to Earth and to creating these new systems and structures that are sustainable, that are going to support us for the long term. Also very much linked to using technology to support this process, and also working with crystals and sort of the wisdom and the codes that can be stored and contained and accessed through crystals. So that may be something that is coming up for you this week, particularly through the trine, which is very, very supportive. So again, you know, the Alpha Centaurians are also very much invested in helping us to reclaim our sovereignty and to break free from systems and mindsets and patterns which have kept us sort of small, or kept us limited, or kept us trapped in some way. So this is all about sovereignty in order to help us move forward. So that feels really, really beautiful. And then we also have in the middle of the week, Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius is going to come into an exact square with Atlantis, which is retrograde, and will be at 3 degrees of Scorpio this week. So again, that feels really, really potent and powerful, because obviously with Pluto squaring his own sign, Scorpio is about the depths of the water, you know, what is hidden, what has been concealed, deep sort of beneath the surface. Obviously Pluto is very good at exposing, digging up what has been hidden. And in Aquarius, this is very much collective energy, but also potentially linked to science and to technology, and perhaps science and technology that may have been used in ways that perhaps weren't for the greater good, that weren't benefiting humanity in some way. Pluto will tend to expose the corrupt action and the corrupt and corruption. And when Pluto is in a square to something, and again, Atlantis, there feels like there's very ancient power coming up here, rising up from the surface. Again, very much about healing as well, which is what Pluto is designed to do. You know, this is very much about destroyer, creator energy. It does feel as if there is likely to be some sort of eruption or power clash. Now that may be playing out karma from Atlantean times, you know, that is coming through in this time to be transmuted, to be cleared. Again, you know, we just work with energy and themes in astrology, but be mindful. I think that is on Wednesday. Let me just check. Yeah, that is on Wednesday, and that's on the same day that Mercury is conjunct Neptune. And also Mercury is sextile Sedna, and of course Sedna is about the oceans and new information and understanding coming from deep within, deep beneath the surface in our subconscious. So again, that is potentially going to be an interesting sort of period, particularly if you know that you have got connections to Atlantis and there's maybe some karma that needs to be revealed. And of course Pluto will always expose as well, so that we can clear, so that we can see things as they truly are. With Aquarius, this is about enlightenment, this is about awakening, and this is very much about truth. And then as Mars is moving through the early degrees of Leo, he's going to come to oppose Pluto. So that again is going to be quite volatile, quite tense. There is definitely a standoff there, and that is going to be active at the new moon in Taurus. So I will talk about that more when I come to talk about the new moon. So I am going to leave it there. I mean, obviously, there's always so many different things happening in the chart, and everything is just moving so quickly at the moment. So I'm sure there'll be lots of things which I haven't brought into this video. But I hope that what I have shared has been useful, and that you're able to gain some insight that resonates and that helps you move through the week. So certainly, you know, that it is that there's a lot of change happening, a lot of shifts with Mercury, Mars and the Sun all moving into these new signs, and also with Venus now direct in the aftermath of this really very powerful full moon. So let me know, what's showing up for you. As always, it's such, I love reading your comments. And as Venus is now direct for me, I think, a lot of I've had a real awakening with Venus in this retrograde period, and I've really connected to her in ways that I have not ever been able to do before. And I can feel her energy rising in me, and really starting to already, within hours of her stationing direct, I can feel this new creative, lots of ideas coming through, things that I wanted to bring, new ways of sharing my content. And my natal Venus is actually in air in Aquarius. So while, I've been invited to really connect with her on a very personal level during this retrograde period, I do feel that my Venus is for the collective, and that, I'm hoping that she's going to be working with me to bring more content in more creative ways, that can really support everybody's ongoing journey and growth and understanding. So I'm feeling really, really excited about what is to come and the potential of that. But again, it is quite early days, and I have to be careful, particularly when I'm still trying to hold on to this sort of slowed down pace and this stillness and this pause energy. I do have to be mindful not to get carried away and run before I can walk. But I do have Jupiter about to cross my midheaven in sort of the next couple of, actually it might be quite soon. It's my midheaven's at 19 degrees of Gemini, so I think that's imminent. So watch this space as Jupiter moves across back into my 10th house. There could be quite a lot going on, but we'll see. I'm going to trust that everything is going to come to me at the aligned and perfect time, which, to be fair, is pretty much what has always happened. And it's beautiful to be able to observe that and to recognize that. So I hope, if that's the same message for you, we shouldn't be sort of trying to push ourselves to kind of get things done. Frenetic energy is not going to work at the moment. It is about coming into the stillness, aligning with the frequency and what you want to attract, first of all within you, and then embodying that so strongly that there is no other option than to send that frequency out and just wait for the universe to match that and to bring those opportunities to you. So that feels like a really strong message for these times, and I hope whoever is meant to hear it has received it. So sending lots of love, lots of gratitude as always. I'm so grateful, and I will be back very soon.